Shalom, 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 Miriam and Richard and Baruch. And today I'm excited about reading through Beshalach. You know, we've read it how many years now, Miriam? 27, 28 years we've been reading these same portions. But every time we read them, we get something new. And He wants us to read His words. And it's so important to read it from the perspective that let's see what this has for us today. So let me share the screen and let's get into it because it's a long portion. It's about 4 chapters. All right, so here we go. Beshalach. Let me just move this over here. Okay. Now, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was closer. For God said, the people may have a change of heart when they see war and return to Egypt. Look at how loving He is. Look how much He protects us and takes care of us. We left with an army of 600,000 armed men, but they had never been to war. And so He was protecting them. He was beginning to show them their strength. They didn't know it yet. So God led the people by the way of the wilderness of the Sea of Reeds, the Yam Suf. And now the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt. The 600,000 did. And Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had exacted an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely take notice of you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So this, as I said last time, it's obvious that these stories were handed down because from between Joseph and Moses, I don't know how much time there was, but it was quite a bit of time. So because the Pharaoh had died, a new Pharaoh arose, and Moses had run away. It was 40 years in the desert. It was 40 years that he was in Egypt. So it's quite a bit of time. It could be 100 years that this was. But he knew the promise that they had made to Joseph that they would take his bones out. So these stories are passed down from generation to generation. So they set out from Sukkot and they encamped at Etam at the edge of the Bamidbar of the wilderness. The Lord went before them in a pillar of cloud by day to guide them along the way, and a pillar of fire by night to give them light that they might travel day and night. Again, and if we look at that today, sometimes we don't know what direction to take. And in the same way that God takes this pillar of cloud that was visible then, it's not visible in the same way now, but He still has a way of guiding us, of bringing us light. Like when we're hoping for something, we want something to happen, or we don't know what to do, what decision to make, and we ask Him to help us. Suddenly we'll think of somebody, or somebody may call, or we'll get an idea, or we'll speak to a friend, and He lights our path for us. He's such a loving God. When I hear that the God of the New Testament is a God of grace and the God of the Old Testament is a God of war and He's a vengeful God, they don't know what they're talking about. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. It was with us at all times, guiding us day and night. And the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and to camp between Migdal and the sea. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. So again, He's giving us He gave Moses very clear directions. And even though today we may not have these same clear directions, He still is directing us. We just have to listen. Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, they're lost, they went astray in the land, and the wilderness is closed in on them. Then I will stiffen Pharaoh's hearts, and I will pursue them. that I may gain glory through Pharaoh and all his armies. And the Egyptians shall know that I am God. It was important to God, not only that the Israelites knew who he is as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, but also that the Egyptians, who represent all the nations, would know who he is. All these things are happening so that all the people of the earth could know who this God is. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his court had a change of heart about the people and said, "What have we done releasing Israel from our service? Who's going to build all these buildings now? We have to bring them back." Even this was after 10 plagues, the death of the firstborn. Even after that, he's still hardening not only Pharaoh's heart, but his court, whoever was left. So the Pharaoh ordered his chariot and took his force and went with him, and he took 600 of his choice chariots and the rest of the chariots of Egypt with officers in all of them. So there's 600 chariots. And if you think that if there's 3 men per chariot times 600, what is that? 1,800. 6 times 3 is 1,800 men, plus the rest of their chariots. I don't know how many they had. But we left, remember, with 600,000 armed men against just 600 chariots and a few more. But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he chased the Israelites. As they were departing, here it says, defiantly, with an upraised hand. They were in triumph. When you raise your hands, like we're free, we're going. The Egyptians gave chase to them, and all the chariot horses of Pharaoh, his riders, and his warriors overtook them and camped by the sea. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites caught sight of the Egyptians advancing toward them. They were so afraid. They cried out to God, and they said to Moses, "Was it because we didn't have enough graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die in the wilderness? What have you done, taking us out of Egypt?" They had just watched all these things, all these miracles happen, and they're yelling at Moses, "What have you done to us?" How many times we do the same thing when we're afraid. Isn't this the very thing we told you in Egypt? We told you, "Leave us alone and let us serve the Egyptians." You see, when we hear these stories, they say that, oh, these Israelites were crying out to God to free us, to free them. They never did. They always said, "Just leave us alone. We just make things a little easier for us. Let us be. We'll serve the Egyptians, for it's better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses said to the people, "Do not fear. Stand by and watch the deliverance which the Lord will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again." God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, will do battle for you. You hold your peace. And here that word is taharishun. Taharishun. It's a very strange word. They don't know what it means. But hold your peace. Keep quiet. Just be still. Remember, there's another verse I remember loving. Be still and know that I am God. And this is what we have to do when we're going through a rough time. Just be still and watch. Then the Lord said to Moses, now even Moses must have been afraid and must have said something to him, because God said, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward." You know, when we're so afraid, we cry to God, but he gave us a brain. He gave us all faith. He gave us a mind to know what to do. We had seen the miracles. Go forward. And it's such a hard thing for us to do. And you lift up your rod and hold out your arms over the sea and split it so that the Israelites may march into the sea on dry ground. And I will stiffen the hearts of the Egyptians so that they go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his warriors, his chariots, and his riders. And again, it doesn't say that only Israel, he will gain glory so that Israel could be proud and say, look at their God. It was so that the Egyptians would know that I am Yud He Vav He, when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his riders. Remember, Egypt represents all the nations of the world. And we can relate that to us today. God wants all the nations of the world to know who he is, because there is only one for everyone. There isn't a God for the Christians and another God for the Hindus and another God for the Arabs, the Muslims around the world. There's only one, Yud He Vav He, the creator of the universe. Now here it says the messenger of God, but here it's Malach, the angel of God, who had been going ahead of the Israelite army, moved and followed behind them. And the pillar of cloud shifted from in front of them, leading the way, and it took place behind them to separate them from the Egyptians. It came between the army of the Egyptians and the army of Israel. So there was a cloud with the darkness, and it cast a spell upon the night. Or there's another word here, it lit up the night. Can you imagine the darkness with a light? I can't even imagine what it was like. So it cast a spell upon the night so that no one could come near the other all through the night. And Moses held out his arm over the sea, and the Lord drove back the sea with a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry ground. The waters split, and the Israelites went into the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall from them both on their right and on their left. I can't even begin to imagine what a sight this was. The Egyptians came in pursuit after them into the sea, and all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and riders. Hold on. And at the morning watch, the Lord looked down upon the Egyptian army. And when morning came, God looked down upon the Egyptian army from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw the Egyptian army into panic. We read this several times, and we will, if you continue reading the Tanakh, you'll see how often our enemies, God puts them into a panic. And he locked the wheels of their chariots so that they moved forward with difficulty. It was hard for them to go. Imagine the horses were pulling them, but the wheels weren't turning. And the Egyptians said, let us run, let us flee from the Israelites, for the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. They wanted at this point to turn back. But then the Lord said to Moses, hold out your arm over the sea, because they had reached they obviously reached the other coast, the other side of the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians and upon their chariots and upon their riders. So Moses held out his arm over the sea, and at daybreak the sea returned to its normal state. And the Egyptians fled at its approach, but the Lord hurled the Egyptians into the sea. They didn't have time to go back. The waters turned back and covered their chariots and their riders, and Pharaoh's entire army that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. Look at this man and his pride. did to Egypt. He destroyed all their crops, destroyed all their land, their trees. He destroyed their families, and now he's destroying their armies. That's why you won't find anything in Egyptian history about this. It's a sheer embarrassment to them. But the Israelites had marched through the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. Thus, the Lord delivered Israel that day from the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea. And when Israel saw the wondrous power which the Lord had wielded against the Egyptians, the people feared God. They had emunah, faith in God and in God's servant Moses. So look what it took for them to get their faith stirred up so that they could believe in him and in the servant Moses, who they kept complaining to and against. And 15 is all about an amazing song that the Israelites sang. Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. Imagine, they were dancing. They said, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and rider is hurled into the sea. The Lord my God is my strength and my might. He has become my deliverer. This is my God, and I will lift him up. I will enshrine him. I will glorify him. The God of my father, I will exalt him. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is a warrior. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is his name. The chariots, Pharaoh's chariots and army, he's cast into the sea. And his choicest officers are drowned in the sea of reeds. The deep covered them. They went down into the depths like stone. Imagine, it's like during the Holocaust, after the camps were freed and they saw the American army coming in. They were rejoicing, even in their fear, they were rejoicing. Your right hand, O Lord, is glorious in power. Your right hand, Lord, shatters the foe. We want to see this today. In your great triumph, you break your opponents. You send forth your fury, and it consumes them like the straw that Pharaoh made us make into brick. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The flood stood straight like a wall. The deeps froze in the heart of the sea. And our enemy said, I will pursue and I will overtake and I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will bear my sword. My hand shall subdue them. But you made your wind blow, and the sea covered them, and they sank like lead in the majestic waters. Michamocha be'elim Adonai, michamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders? You put forth your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. In your love, you led the people you redeemed. In your strength, you guide them to your holy abode. The peoples hear, they tremble. Agony grips the dwellers in Philistia. Wherever we would go now, wherever, the people were trembling in advance because they heard what our God could do. The clans of Edom are dismayed. The tribes of Moab are trembling. All the dwellers of Canaan are aghast. Terror and dread descend upon them. Through the might of your arm, they are as still as stone, till your people cross over, Lord. Till your people cross, whom you have ransomed. You will bring them and plant them in your own mountain, the place you made to dwell in, Yerushalayim, the sanctuary, O my Lord, which your hands established. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. The Lord will reign forever and ever. And this ever has not finished yet. He is going to reign. So when we see all these things happening in the world, listen with one ear, keep in tune, in touch with what's going on. But God's in control. He will reign forever and ever. For the horses of Pharaoh and his chariots and his riders went into the sea, just like our enemies cannot rule for long. They will be destroyed. And the Lord turned back on them the waters of the sea. But the Israelites marched on dry ground in the middle of the sea. Then Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister, picked up a hand drum or a tambourine, and all the women went out after her and danced with tambourines. And Miriam chanted for them, "Sing to the Lord, Shear Lashem, Shear Ladonai, for he has triumphed in glory v'kavod. Horse and rider has hurled into the sea." Then Moses caused Israel to leave, to set out from the Sea of Reeds, from Yam Suf. And they went on into the wilderness of Shur. They traveled 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. They came to Marah, but they couldn't drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. That's why it's named Marah, because Mar in Hebrew means bitter. And the people grumbled against Moses. "What are we going to drink?" So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a fixed rule. There they were put to the test. And this is the beginning of the testing that we would go through during the next 38 years in the desert. We were only supposed to go for 11 days. But because we kept testing and trying and complaining, God would keep us there for 38 years until that whole generation died out. When I look at this, the water became sweet. It reminds me of the prophecy of what will happen to the Dead Sea. And little by little, they're showing spots now. If you look this up, you can find it on YouTube, how the parts of the water of the Dead Sea is starting to live again. And this is going to happen in the future. God said, this is important because this is what we will need for the rest of our journey. Because up to now, we have been completely taken care of and nurtured by God. But now we have to start growing up. And he says, if you will heed, it says, shamoa tishma, guard, listen, heed your God diligently, doing what is right, righteous in his be'enai, in his sight, giving ear, listening to his mitzvot, his commandment, and keeping all his chukim, his statutes. I will not bring upon you any of the diseases that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I, the Lord, am your healer. This should make the entire medical system shake in their boots, but they're not shaking because we're not listening. Our people are not giving ear to his commandments, and they're not keeping his chukim. For the most part, the world is not doing that. And so we're not partaking of this promise that he would not bring upon us any of the diseases that he brought upon the Egyptians. He is our healer. Rofecha. Oh, thank you, God, for being my healer. And they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. And if you look today at Elim, you'll see the 12 springs of water and you'll see the 70 palm trees. So they camped there by the water.
Peggy,
Yeah.
what do you said literally, if you look at in Elim, they have
Look it up.
literally 70 palm trees.
Literally 70
Where
palm.
exactly is Elim?
Well, you'll have to look it up map.
Okay.
I'll find it for you another time.
Okay, but
Yeah.
they literally counted 70 palm trees.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. Setting out from Elim, the whole Israelite community came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. In the wilderness, the entire Israelite community kvetched against Moses and Aaron. What else is new? Look what's going on in Israel today, constantly kvetching against the leadership, no matter what they try to do. The Israelites say to them, if only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, where we had all kinds of flesh pots, loads of meat in their pots, and we ate our fill of bread. How soon we forget. For you have brought us out of this wilderness, out into this wilderness, to starve this whole congregation to death. They left with all their flocks. Give me a break. It reminds me of people who have millions of dollars, but they're so afraid. They have this fear. Some of them, believe it or not, are survivors. They've lost everything at one point in their life. And so they don't realize, they can't see what they have. They only see what they don't have. And the fear it blinds them to the reality of what they have. And the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread for you from the sky, and the people shall go out and gather every day that day's portion, so that I may test them and see whether they follow my instructions or not. But on the sixth day, when they gather, they portion what they've brought in, it shall prove to be double the amount that they gather each day, meaning on the sixth day, which is Friday, before the Shabbat, they're going to be able to gather double the amount so that they don't have to work on the Shabbat. So Moses and Aaron told the Israelites, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. As if they don't know by now. 10 plagues. Oh, the sea
I was
parted.
just going to say it's so much a metaphor for our lives, because the story goes on and on and on. And here they say, by evening, you shall know, like you were saying, after everything that's happened. But look at our lives. Some of us are older already, and we still go through the same thing.
Exactly. You shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you shall behold the presence of the Lord. Where is it here? Tilun Tuluna Tenechem. What does this mean? No, that's not it. In the morning, Baboker. Baboker, they should see et kavod. Here, the glory. They would see the glory, his presence. Because God heard their grumblings, their complaints against God. For who are we that you should complain against us? God is the one doing all these things, bringing all this. Why are you complaining? Since it is Yud He Vav He who will give you meat to eat in the evening and bread in the morning until you're full. Because He, the Lord, has heard your complaints that you're uttering. What is our part? You're grumbling against God, not against us. We can't do any of these things. It's God. Whenever we complain, bottom line is we're complaining against God. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole Israelite community, advance toward the Lord, who has heard your grumbling. And as Aaron spoke to the whole Israelite community, they turned toward the wilderness, and there, in a cloud, appeared the kavod, the glory of the Lord, who spoke to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Speak to them and say, by evening you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall eat your fill of bread, and you shall know that I, the Lord, am your God. In the evening, quail appeared and covered the camp, In the morning there was a fall of dew about the camp. When the fall of dew lifted, over the surface of the wilderness lay a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, Man hu, what is this? For they did not know what it is. And Moses said to them, That is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat. It was the Lord that came directly from the heavens. God provided it. Here you see, man hu. It's really, the word is man, but people call it manna, but the word is man in the Hebrew. This is what the Lord has commanded. Every household shall gather only as much as it requires to eat. Don't get too much. Sometimes we fill our fridges so much and half of it spoils. And God wants us to trust Him. Just take as much as you're going to eat. An omer to each person, for as many as you are, there are. Each household shall gather according to as many as are living in its tent. The Israelites did so. Some gathered much, some little, depending on how many lived in their home. But when they measured it by the omer, anyone who had gathered much had no excess, and anyone who'd gathered little had no deficiency. Each household had gathered as much as it needed to eat. And Moses said to them, Don't leave any of it over till morning. Don't keep it for the Shabbat. God supplied for both days. But they paid no attention to Moses. Some of them left it until morning, and it became infested with maggots, and it stank. And Moses was angry with them. Oh no, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This is not talking about the Shabbat. Each day they would go out and gather enough for the day and not leave over to the next day. Just trust that the next day God would provide. And those who didn't, but they paid no attention to Moses. What else is new? Some of them left some of it till morning, thinking they can go and find it. They had no refrigeration. They had no salt. They had nothing to preserve it. It became infested. But the idea was trust. So Moses was angry with them. So they gathered it every morning, as much as each one needed to eat. For when the sun grew hot, it would melt. So they had to go out early in the morning while it was still cool. On the sixth day, they gathered double the amount, 2 omers for each. Before they chose 1 omer for each person. Now it would be 2 omers per person. And when all the chieftains of the community came and told Moses, he said to them, This is what Yud He Vav He meant. Tomorrow is a Shabbat, a day of rest. A Shabbat Kodesh, set apart from the rest of the week. It's for God. Bake what you would bake, boil what you would boil, because the substance, some could bake it, some would boil it. And all that is left, put it aside to be kept until morning. So they put it aside until morning, as Moses had ordered, and it did not turn foul, and there were no maggots in it. Amazing. Look what God was doing. Then God said, Eat it today, for today is the Shabbat of the Lord. You will not find it today on the plain. You don't go out. Don't go looking for it. Trust me. 6 days you shall gather, and on the 7th day, the Shabbat, there will be none. Yet still some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather, but they found nothing. And the Lord said to Moses, How long will you all refuse to obey my commandments and my teachings? And because we read this in the Torah and we understand what God does for us, I want to cry out to my own people, how long will you all refuse to obey God's commandments and his teachings? And I have to add myself in there because I'm not always faithful to them. But I know when I'm not. Let me tell you, I know the consequences. Mark that it is Yud He Vav He who has given you the Shabbat. He gives you 2 days' food on the 6th day. Let everybody remain in their homes. Let no one leave the vicinity on the 7th day. Stay close to home. Go outside. Like when we go, Miriam, to Outremont, and we walk around and we see all the, the Altegegen, we see the Hasidim gathering around their area, walking around the vicinity. That's the way it was like. They talked, they relaxed, they thought about the old days. So the people remained quiet on the 7th day. Here it's interesting. It says Yishvatu, like it's the word Shabbat is in here. They were at rest on the 7th day, B'Yom HaShvi. The house of Israel named it Man. Here it says Man, even though they call it manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and it tasted like some kind of wafers or biscuits and honey. Must have been delicious. And Moses said, "This is what the Lord had commanded. Let one omer of it be kept throughout the ages." They would put that omer in the Ark of the Covenant later, and they would carry it around with the rod, the rod that bloomed almonds, and the 2 tablets of stone. Would come later,
So
but they
that
would
manna never went bad. The one
no.
in the ark, it's like it's almost like it's supernaturally preserved.
Mm-hmm.
It was set apart.
Absolutely marvelous. In order that they may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Moses said to Aaron, what did Yeshua say about the bread? Um, it's like his word is living water, and the words that come out are like the bread that was given to us, the bread from heaven. The Torah is like bread from heaven. And Moses said to Aaron, take a jar, put 1 omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout the ages. And as the Lord had commanded Moses, Aaron placed it before the ark, the pact. Where is it here? Lifnei ha'edut, to be kept. Lishma, lish, shamo, lishamar, shamaret. My Hebrew's not great. And the Israelites ate manna for 40 years. He provided for them 40 years until they came to the settled land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. And that's when God was not going to provide for them anymore. They would have to provide for themselves. The omer is 1/10 of an ephah. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole Israelite community continued by stages as the Lord would command. They would go from one stop to the next. They would camp at Rephidim, where there was no water to drink. The people quarreled with Moses. Give us water to drink. And they said to Moses, and Moses replied to them, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you keep testing God? But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? Oh my God, who knows what we would have done if we were there. Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, what am I going to do with these people? Before long, they're going to be stoning me. So the Lord said to Moses, pass before the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take along the rod with which you struck the Nile, and set out. I'll be standing there before you on the rock at Horeb, which is Sinai. Strike the rock, and water will issue from it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders. If you look up today, the real Mount Sinai, you will see not far a rock, a huge rock that has a split down the center. And you could see that's where, and it shows where the water would have issued forth from it. Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. The place was named Massah and Meribah. These names are all been given for specific reasons, because later when they are going to be reminded of these places, these stages, it was every time they complained and every time God would do a miracle for them, because the Israelites would keep quarreling, because they tested God, saying, is the Lord really present among us or not? How often we can go one day where we think, oh, God is with me. Oh my goodness, look at this miracle that just happened in my life. Everything, a door opened, the Red Sea split, and God solved my problem. And the next day, when we forget, did God really do that? Is He really with us? We're so human. And here Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. This was the same Amalek that would continue to bother us right up until today. Moses said to Joshua, pick some men for us, go out and do battle with Amalek. And tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. When Moses' hand grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur, one on each side, supported his hands. Thus his hands remained steady until the sun set. See, Moses wasn't alone in doing all these things. He had his brother. He had Hur. Just as I got to Exodus 17, verse 13, my internet went out, and so I had to, the recording was cut. So here I am back again, and I'm going to read. I'm going to share the screen so that you can read it, and just to get context of where we are. So we see that Joshua did as Moses told him. This is verse 10, and fought with Amalek, our enemies, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. I think that I'd already read that, but Hur is the assistant. Moses didn't do things alone. Joshua was with him, Aaron was with him, and Hur was with him. So they went to the top of the hill. Then, whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But when Moses' hands grew heavy, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Then Aaron and Hur, one on each side, supported his hands. Thus his hands remained steady until the sun set. And that's such an important concept for us to know, because I know there are times when I'm just tired, exhausted, discouraged. And I say, why? What am I doing this for? How am I going to go on? The enemies out there, all these people, whatever. Well, all the things that go on in our head when we feel we can't go on another minute. But we have our Aaron and we have our Hur, this is H-U-R, excuse me. And we have people around us who care about us, who trust in what we trust in, and are also called by God. We are never alone. This is so important for us to remember. And Joshua overwhelmed the people of Amalek with the sword. Let's see what this Amalek and his people. Amalek also was not alone, but he was on the wrong side of the fence. But Joshua overwhelmed them with the sword. Thank God for that. Then Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, inscribe this in a document as a reminder and read it aloud to Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And we can hold on to this promise, this prophecy. And it's inscribed in this document, the Torah, for us to remember, because Amalek is still alive and well. It's a spirit of hatred, of sinat hinam, of free hatred under heaven. God will wipe them out. So one day we know that just as he wiped out the enemies of at the time of Noah, because there was so much evil in the world. Remember the violence at that time? The violence was the word for violence in Hebrew was, do you remember? Hamas. And Hamas is part of the spirit of Amalek. At Purim, we celebrate the winning over the king Agag, who was taken. They won. Haman was going to destroy our people. He was trying to completely wipe us off the map, and he chose an exact date to do it, just as they chose October the 23rd. October the 7th last year, 2023, to do it. And that is the spirit of Amalek. It's interesting. Hamas, Haman are not far from each other. And Moses built an altar and named it Adonai Nisi. Adonai is the miracle. Nez is a miracle. At Hanukkah, we say Nez Gadol Hayasham. A great miracle happened there. God is the doer of miracles. It's not the people. Remember, Moses is not calling himself Adonai here, but he worships, he serves the God who does miracles. And the miracle of taking us out of Egypt and bringing us into the right here to Sinai. He said it means hand upon the throne. Let's see what it says here. Throne. The meaning of Hebrew was uncertain. Okay. It means hand upon the throne of Yud He Vav He. Yud He Vav He will be at war with Amalek throughout the ages. And that's something that we can hold on to. All right. So I'll stop the share. There's no one that I'm talking to now because I didn't call for another meeting, but I just wanted to finish what I had started yesterday. Anyway, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Keep reading the Torah. Read it for yourself every day. Ask God to open your eyes of understanding. Take yourself there as if you're there. You don't always have to wait for others to interpret things for us. We have been given our mind, spiritual eyes, and we can see what God is trying to say. Of course, there are different levels of interpretation. The rabbis have many levels of interpretation, from the mystical to the very basic understanding. And what I'm covering here is the very basic understanding for us. So again, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you all. Thank you.